Wait. Stop everything you're doing right now. What I'm about to show you happened exactly 72 hours ago. And if you miss this, if you scroll past this video, you might never understand what just changed forever in America. September 25, 2025. 11:47 p.m. Eastern Time. While most Americans were sleeping, a single decision was made that biblical scholars have been warning about for decades. A decision that has pharmaceutical executives in London crying. That has world leaders in emergency sessions at 3 a.m. That has economists comparing what's happening now to the collapse of entire civilizations. But here's what's terrifying. Here's what's keeping me awake at night. This isn't just happening in Washington. This isn't just politics. This is the exact scenario that the Apostle John saw in his vision on the island of Patmos 2,000 years ago. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to show you something that will make your hands shake. I'm going to reveal the connection between an announcement made 3 days ago and a prophecy written before America even existed. I'm going to prove to you that what's happening right now isn't random policy. It's not economic strategy. It's the testing ground for the mark of the beast system. And if you think you have time to prepare, if you think this doesn't affect you personally, if you think you can wait and see what happens, you're already too late. But if you're brave enough to see what's really happening, if you're ready to understand why major corporations are literally building altars of submission right now as we speak, if you want to know why this moment in history was prophesied thousands of years before it happened, then you need to hear every single word of what I'm about to tell you. Because what happens next will determine whether you stand or fall when the final test comes. And that test is closer than you think. Listen closely. What I'm about to share with you will send chills down your spine. Right now, as I speak these words, something unprecedented is unfolding in America. Something that biblical scholars have whispered about for centuries. The pieces are falling into place. And you need to understand what this means for you, for your family, for every person on this earth. On September 25, 2025, President Trump made an announcement that shook the global economy to its core. 100% tariffs on pharmaceuticals. 25% on trucks. 50% on kitchen cabinets. Starting October 1st. But this isn't just about trade wars or economics. This is about something far deeper. Something prophetic. Do you hear that? The sound of supply chains grinding to a halt. The whispers in boardrooms across the world. The panic in pharmaceutical companies from India to Europe. But beneath all this chaos, there's something else. The sound of ancient prophecy beginning to unfold. Turn with me to Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 and 17. John the Apostle wrote these words nearly 2,000 years ago, yet they feel like they were written yesterday. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Buy or sell. Think about that. John saw a time when commerce itself would become a weapon of control. When the ability to trade, to purchase life's necessities, would be controlled by a system so powerful that it could dictate who lives and who dies. Are you beginning to see it? These aren't random policy decisions. This is the systematic reshaping of global commerce. The United States, the world's largest economy, is literally choking off international trade. The average U.S. tariff rate has risen from 2.5% to 27% in less than a year. 27%. The highest level in over a century. But here's what's really happening. When you control medicine, you control life and death. When you control transportation, you control the flow of goods. When you control the basic necessities of homes and shelter, you control where people can live, how they can live. Daniel chapter 2 speaks of a final kingdom that will crush all others. A kingdom of iron mixed with clay. Strong in some places, brittle in others. Could this be what we're witnessing? The rise of an economic superpower that uses trade as its weapon? Listen to the sounds echoing from corporate boardrooms tonight. The frantic phone calls. The emergency meetings. Pharmaceutical companies in the UK exported over $6 billion in drugs to America last year. Imagine if that tap was turned off overnight. Imagine the desperation, the pleading, the willingness to do anything, agree to anything, just to keep their businesses alive. This is what economic warfare looks like in the end times. It's not tanks rolling across borders. It's the slow strangulation of nations through trade. It's forcing entire countries to their knees without firing a single shot. Do you feel it? That tightening in your chest? That sense that we're watching something biblical unfold before our very eyes? You should. Because what's happening right now has been written in Scripture for 2 millennia. The prophet Daniel spoke of a time when the people of God would face their greatest test. Not through physical persecution alone, but through economic pressure. Through systems that would force them to choose between their faith and their survival. Think about this. Right now, tonight, there are pharmaceutical executives in boardrooms across the globe, staring at spreadsheets, calculating losses, wondering how they'll survive. Some of these companies produce life-saving medications. Cancer drugs, heart medications, insulin for diabetics. And with the stroke of a pen, their access to the world's largest market has been cut in half, or eliminated entirely. But this is bigger than business. This is about preparation. This is about testing. This is about God preparing His people for what's coming. Jesus Himself warned us in Matthew 24 verse 21. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Great tribulation. Not just spiritual persecution, but economic chaos. Systems collapsing. Nations fighting for survival. Are you ready for what's coming? Because what we're seeing isn't the end. It's the beginning. These tariffs, this economic warfare, it's reshaping the entire global order. Countries that have relied on trade with America for decades are now scrambling to find alternatives. The European Union is pleading for urgent discussions. India is being forced to choose between Russian oil and American markets. Do you see the pattern? Nations being forced to choose sides. Alliances being tested. Economic blocs forming and dissolving. This is exactly what the prophets foretold about the end times. A time when commerce itself would become a battlefield. But here's what troubles me the most. Here's what should keep every believer awake tonight. These aren't just economic policies. They're conditioning mechanisms. They're teaching the world that survival depends on compliance. That access to life's necessities can be turned on or off by those in power. Think about it. If a government can control your access to medicine, what else can it control? If it can dictate which countries you trade with, what else can it dictate? We're watching the infrastructure of the mark of the beast system being built right before our eyes. The Apostle Paul warned Timothy in 2 Timothy 3 verse 1. This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. Perilous times. Times when the very foundations of society would be shaken. When nations would rise against nations, and kingdoms against kingdoms. But Paul didn't stop there. He warned that men would be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy. Does this sound familiar? Look around you. Look at the leaders making these decisions. Look at the pride. The boasting. The complete disregard for how their actions affect the common people. Right now, as I speak, there are families across America who depend on imported medications to survive. Diabetics who need insulin. Cancer patients who need specialized drugs. Heart patients who need specific medications to keep their hearts beating. And starting October 1st, those medications could double in price. Or disappear entirely. This is the testing. This is the tribulation that separates the wheat from the chaff. When survival becomes expensive, when basic necessities become luxury items, that's when you discover what people truly worship. That's when you discover who will bow down to the system and who will trust in God. Isaiah 55 verses 8 to 9 reminds us, For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. God's ways are not man's ways. While world leaders play their games of economic chess, moving nations around like pieces on a board, God is orchestrating something far greater. He's preparing His bride. He's refining His people. He's separating those who trust in the system from those who trust in Him alone. But here's what's truly chilling. These pharmaceutical tariffs? They come with an exemption. If companies build manufacturing plants in America, if they bow to the system, if they comply with the demands, they get a pass. Sound familiar? Revelation 13 verses 15 to 16 warned us. And He had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And He causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads. Compliance brings exemption. Resistance brings economic death. This is the blueprint being tested right now, in real time, before our eyes. Do you understand the spiritual significance of what's happening? This isn't just about trade. This is about worship. This is about allegiance. This is about who you serve when the pressure is on and your survival is at stake. Eli Lilly just announced a $6.5 billion manufacturing plant in Houston, right after Trump's threats. Coincidence? They're building in Richmond, Virginia too. Another $5 billion. These aren't business decisions. These are acts of submission. These are companies bowing to the new economic order. And it's working. The system is working exactly as prophesied. Economic pressure creating compliance. Financial threats forcing allegiance. This is how the mark of the beast system will operate. Not through force alone, but through necessity. Through making survival dependent on submission. Listen to me carefully. I want you to imagine something. Imagine you're a father. You have children who need medication to survive. The pharmacy tells you the price just doubled because of tariffs. But wait, there's an option. If you register for a new economic system, if you accept certain conditions, if you agree to certain monitoring, you can get the old price. What do you do? This is the test that's coming. This is the choice that millions will face. Not just in America, but around the world. Because what America does, the world follows. When the largest economy on earth changes the rules of trade, everyone else must adapt or perish. The prophet Habakkuk cried out in chapter 1:2, O Lord, how long shall I cry, and thou wilt not hear? Even cry out unto thee of violence, and thou wilt not save. He saw injustice. He saw systems crushing the innocent. He saw the wicked prospering while the righteous suffered. But God's answer was profound. He told Habakkuk to watch and be amazed. Because God would do something in His days that he wouldn't believe even if it were told to him. Something so incredible, so beyond human understanding, that it would leave people speechless. Could it be that what we're witnessing now is part of that unbelievable work? Could it be that God is using even these economic weapons to accomplish His purposes? To prepare His people? To separate the faithful from the faithless? The kitchen cabinet tariffs might seem insignificant to you. 50% on imported cabinets and bathroom vanities. But think deeper. What's a home without a kitchen? What's a bathroom without fixtures? These aren't luxury items. These are basic human needs. Shelter. Sanitation. The foundations of civilized life. And now, those foundations are being priced out of reach for millions of Americans. The cost of building a home, of renovating, of simply maintaining decent living conditions, is about to skyrocket. Not because of natural disasters or resource shortages, but because of political decisions. Human choices. The exercise of power over the powerless. This is what oppression looks like in the modern world. It doesn't come with chains and whips. It comes with tariffs and regulations. It comes with policies that sound reasonable but create impossible choices for ordinary people. Proverbs 22 verse 7 warns us, The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. We're watching this principle play out on a global scale. Nations becoming servants to the economic powers that control their access to essential goods. Companies becoming slaves to the systems that determine their survival. But here's what the enemy doesn't understand. Here's what these economic warriors haven't calculated. God's people have always thrived under pressure. The early church grew fastest under persecution. The Jewish people survived Babylon, Egypt, and Rome. God's remnant always emerges stronger from the fire. Are you part of that remnant? Are you ready to trust God when the system fails? Are you prepared to choose faith over convenience, truth over security, God over government? Because that choice is coming. Faster than you think. These tariffs are just the beginning. The economic restructuring of the world has only just started. And as it accelerates, as the pressure increases, as the choices become more stark, you're going to need an anchor that's stronger than any human system. That anchor is Jesus Christ. The same Jesus who fed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. The same Jesus who turned water into wine. The same Jesus who provided for his disciples even when they had nothing. The same Jesus who promised that God knows what you need before you ask. Matthew 6 verse 26 reminds us, "Behold the fowls of the air, for they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are ye not much better than they?" The birds don't worry about tariffs. They don't panic about supply chains. They don't lose sleep over economic policies. Because they trust in a provider who is greater than all human systems combined. That's the faith we need. That's the trust we must cultivate. Not in politicians or policies, not in economies or governments, but in the God who controls the hearts of kings and the movements of nations. Because this story isn't ending with human victory. This story isn't concluding with any earthly kingdom triumphant. This story ends with the King of Kings returning to establish his kingdom. A kingdom where there will be no more tariffs, no more economic warfare, no more systems designed to control and oppress. Revelation 21 verse 4 promises, "And God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, either sorrow, nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away." The former things. Including these trade wars. Including these economic systems of control. Including these attempts to make survival dependent on submission to human authority. All of it will pass away. But God's kingdom will remain forever. So as you watch these headlines unfold, as you see these prophecies being fulfilled, as you witness the birth pangs of a new world order, remember this: you're not watching the victory of evil. You're watching the final thrashing of a defeated enemy. You're seeing the death throes of a system that was always destined to fail. And in that knowledge, in that certainty, in that unshakable hope, you can stand firm. You can trust completely. You can face whatever comes with peace in your heart and power in your spirit. Because the God who holds tomorrow also holds you. But here's where the story becomes truly terrifying. Here's where the prophecy takes a turn that will make your blood run cold. Within hours of Trump's announcement, something unprecedented began happening around the world. Something that proves we're not just witnessing economic policy. We're witnessing the birth of the system that will eventually demand your soul. In Malaysia, at that very moment, the U.S. trade representative was sitting across from Asian officials, assuring them there would be no new tariffs. "Our current focus is on negotiations, not on introducing further tariffs," he said with confidence. But 12 hours later, Trump's social media post shattered that promise. 12 hours. That's how quickly the rules can change. That's how fast your security can vanish. Do you understand what this means? It means no negotiation is safe. No agreement is permanent. No nation can trust that tomorrow will look like today. This is the chaos that breeds desperation. This is the uncertainty that makes people beg for stability at any cost. And the cost is becoming clear. Asia supplies 40% of America's imports. 40%. Imagine if 40% of your income disappeared overnight. Imagine if 40% of your food, your medicine, your basic necessities suddenly became unavailable or unaffordable. That's what entire nations are facing right now. But watch what happens next. Watch how the system responds. Because this is where biblical prophecy becomes reality before our eyes. Eli Lilly just announced a $6.5 billion manufacturing plant in Houston. right after Trump's threats. Another $5 billion in Richmond, Virginia. These aren't business decisions. These are acts of submission. These are companies literally building altars of compliance. And it's working. The system is working exactly as the prophet Daniel foretold in chapter 3. Remember Nebuchadnezzar's golden image? Remember how he commanded all nations, peoples, and languages to bow down when they heard the music? And remember what happened to those who refused? Whoso falleth not down and worship shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. That's not ancient history. That's today's headlines. The furnace isn't fire anymore. It's economic death. It's being shut out of the system. It's watching your business, your livelihood, your ability to provide for your family go up in smoke. But here's what's even more chilling. Trump didn't just announce tariffs. He defined exactly what companies need to do to escape them. IS building, he said, will be defined as breaking ground and or under construction. Do you hear the precision in those words? Do you see the specificity? This isn't random policy. This is systematic conditioning. This is teaching the world that survival requires visible, measurable compliance. Not just agreement. Not just promises. Physical, tangible proof of submission. And the response has been immediate and global. Pharmaceutical companies that have operated independently for decades are suddenly announcing massive U.S. construction projects. Not because it makes business sense. Not because it's profitable. But because it's the price of survival. This is how the mark of the beast system will function. Not through force alone, but through making compliance the only path to life. Johnson & Johnson projected $400 million in tariff expenses for 2025. $400 million. Before these new pharmaceutical tariffs were even announced. Imagine the pressure in those boardrooms. Imagine the desperation in those executive meetings. Imagine the calculations being made about what they're willing to sacrifice to stay in the game. And now, with 100% tariffs looming, that $400 million looks like pocket change. Companies are staring at potential losses that could destroy them overnight. Unless they comply. Unless they submit. Unless they build their altars in America. But listen carefully to what's happening in the healthcare sector. Because this is where the prophecy becomes personal. This is where it reaches into your medicine cabinet, into your hospital room, into your family's most vulnerable moments. Health policy experts are warning that these tariffs could disrupt drug supply chains, potentially raising costs for treatments or worsening existing medication shortages. Let me translate that for you. People are going to die because of these policies. Not might die. Will die. Cancer patients who can't afford their chemotherapy. Diabetics who can't access insulin. Heart patients whose medications become too expensive. Children with rare diseases whose treatments are suddenly out of reach. This is what Revelation 6 verses 5 to 6 warned us about. And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, Come and see. And I beheld, and lo a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. A penny for a measure of wheat. That's a day's wages for a day's food. Survival becomes expensive. Basic necessities become luxury items. And the oil and wine? The things the wealthy need? Those remain untouched. Do you see it? While ordinary families struggle to afford life-saving medications, the wealthy will still have access to whatever they need. While middle-class Americans choose between medicine and food, the elite will continue living in comfort. This is the economic system of the end times. Not equal suffering, but targeted suffering. Not random hardship, but strategic pressure designed to force compliance from specific groups while rewarding submission from others. And it's accelerating faster than anyone predicted. The European Union is in panic mode. Growth projections have been slashed to 1.2% this year, 1.1% in 2026. China, which has been targeted by waves of Trump's tariffs, is seeing growth decline to 4.9%, heading toward 4.4% next year. The global economy is not just slowing. It's being systematically restructured. Nations that refuse to comply are being economically strangled. Countries that submit are being rewarded with exemptions and special deals. This is exactly the pattern Revelation 13 described. A system where your economic survival depends entirely on your willingness to worship at the altar of power. But here's where it gets truly prophetic. Here's where the pieces of the puzzle come together in a way that should make every believer stop and pay attention. Trump is now considering tariffs on foreign electronics based on the number of chips in each device. Think about that. Every electronic device you own could be taxed based on its technological complexity. Your smartphone, your laptop, your smart TV, your car's computer system. All potentially subject to tariffs that make them unaffordable for ordinary people. This isn't just about economics anymore. This is about controlling access to technology. This is about determining who gets to participate in the modern world and who gets left behind. Remember what Jesus said in Matthew 24 verse 22. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. Those days. The days when survival itself becomes a privilege granted or withdrawn by human authority. We're watching those days begin. But the most chilling part isn't what's happening in America. It's what's happening in the minds of world leaders watching all of this unfold. They're learning. They're seeing how economic pressure can accomplish what military force never could. They're witnessing how quickly sovereign nations can be brought to their knees through trade policy. They're understanding that control doesn't require armies. It requires access. And they're planning their own versions of this system. The beast of Revelation won't rise in isolation. It will emerge from a world that has already learned to accept economic coercion as normal. From nations that have already taught their people that survival depends on compliance. From populations that have already been conditioned to trade their freedom for their security. That conditioning is happening right now. Every company that builds a plant to avoid tariffs is being conditioned. Every nation that changes its policies to maintain market access is being conditioned. Every consumer who accepts higher prices rather than going without is being conditioned. And most importantly, every person who watches this happen and thinks it's just politics, just economics, just the normal functioning of government, is being conditioned to accept the unacceptable. This is how the mark of the beast system will be received with gratitude rather than resistance. Because by the time it arrives, people will have been trained to see economic control as protection, submission as security, compliance as survival. The pharmaceutical companies racing to build U.S. plants aren't being forced at gunpoint. They're being offered a choice. Submit or perish. Build here or lose access to our markets. Comply with our demands or watch your business die. And they're choosing submission. Every time. Because the alternative is economic death. This is the template. This is the pattern. This is how the final system will operate. Not through obvious tyranny, but through impossible choices. Not through overt oppression, but through making compliance the only rational decision. But here's what the enemy doesn't understand. Here's what these economic architects haven't calculated. God's people have always known that there are things worth more than survival. There are principles worth more than prosperity. There are truths worth more than temporary security. Daniel's 3 friends knew this when they faced Nebuchadnezzar's furnace. They said, "Our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. But if not..." 3 words that changed history. 3 words that declared independence from any system that demands the soul as payment for the body's survival. The early Christians knew this when Rome offered them incense and emperor worship as the price of peace. They chose the lions rather than betray their Lord. The question is, do you know this? When the pressure comes to you personally, when your family's survival hangs in the balance, when choosing God means choosing hardship, while choosing the system means choosing comfort, what will you do? Because that choice is coming. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but it's coming. And everything happening right now is preparing the world for that moment. The global economy is being rewired to operate on compliance rather than competition. Nations are learning to submit rather than resist. Companies are choosing survival over sovereignty. And populations everywhere are being taught that adaptation is wisdom, resistance is folly, and independence is impossible. But the most important lesson being taught is this: the system always wins. Those who comply prosper. Those who resist perish. There is no third option. That's the lie. That's the deception. That's the great delusion that will sweep the world in the end times. Because there is a third option. There always has been. His name is Jesus Christ. And he offers something the system never can: life that doesn't depend on anyone's permission, security that no government can revoke, provision that no tariff can touch. But receiving that life requires trusting him more than trusting the system. It requires believing his promises more than believing their threats. It requires choosing his kingdom over their kingdom, even when his kingdom is invisible and their kingdom controls everything you can see. The tariffs are just the beginning. The economic warfare is just the preparation. The conditioning is just the prelude. What's coming next will test every person on earth. What's coming next will separate the wheat from the chaff. What's coming next will reveal who truly trusts in God and who secretly trusts in man. Are you ready? Not economically ready, not physically ready, but spiritually ready? Ready to stand when everyone else is bowing? Ready to trust when everyone else is compromising? Ready to choose the invisible kingdom over the visible system? Because the choice is coming. The testing is coming. The great separation is coming. And when it does, all that will matter is whether you know the God who fed Elijah by ravens, who provided manna in the wilderness, who turned water into wine, who multiplied loaves and fishes, who raised the dead to life. The God who holds the keys to life and death, who controls the hearts of kings, who determines the rise and fall of nations. The God who promises that those who trust in him will never be put to shame. That's your choice. That's your hope. That's your unshakable foundation in a world where everything else is shifting sand. Choose wisely. Choose quickly. Choose now. Because the night is coming when no man can work. But for those who belong to him, that night will become the dawn of eternal day.